pregnant isn't easy. Trust me, I know. Even with today's medical appointments and scans, dietary advice and specially made maternity clothes, getting through 9 months of carrying a baby is no mean feat. But as someone obsessed with history, being pregnant got me thinking, how much easier do I have it today than women in the past? So to find out, I decided to take a fascinating but far from comprehensive look back at some of the weirdest and most wonderful aspects of the history of pregnancy. From what women ate and wore, to what doctors thought was really going on inside their bellies. So strap in, because we've got magic spells, maternity corsets, and toad-based pregnancy tests. All, hopefully, before I go into labour. Most women today find out they're pregnant in a pretty standard way, at home with one of these. But at-home pregnancy tests were only first patented in the 1960s. So what did women do before then? Well, it turns out that using a woman's wee to diagnose pregnancy is nothing new. Back in ancient Egypt, papyri from around 1500 to 1300 BCE reveal how a woman might urinate on wheat or barley and wait to see if the seeds sprouted. If they did, congratulations were in order. In 1656, the complete midwife's practice suggested diagnosing pregnancy by boiling up a woman's urine to look for white streaks. And in the 16th and 17th centuries, so-called uromancers, or piss prophets, claimed that the colour, smell and texture of a woman's urine could even reveal whether it was a boy or girl. But when it comes to using urine for pregnancy testing, no one quite beats the British experimental zoologist Lancelot Hogben. In the early 20th century, he discovered that if a pregnant woman's wee was injected under the skin of a female frog, that frog would start laying eggs. This became a remarkably reliable method of testing for pregnancy, with tens of thousands of frogs injected from the 1940s right up to the 1960s. As one doctor told Hogben's team, "Thank you for your report on the pregnancy test of Mrs. X. You may be interested to know that of one GP of many years standing, one specialist gynecologist, and one frog, only the frog was correct."
Even after a positive test, the early weeks of pregnancy can be an anxious and uncertain time. So it's no surprise that throughout history, there have been attempts to get to grips with what exactly was happening inside a woman's womb. To find out more, I headed to London's Wellcome collection to speak with historian Elma Brenner. Elma, talk us through what we're looking at here.
So this is a very special book from the 16th century. It's called The Birth of Mankind, otherwise named The Woman's Book.
So what are we coming to, the Woman's Book as it was called, to learn?
Yeah, so it's really learning about all kinds of aspects of women's reproductive experiences, in particular fertility, the different stages of pregnancy, the different things that they could expect to experience in childbirth, and then also the postnatal experience as well. We have printed images of key aspects of reproductive health. So at the top of the page is a birthing stool, which would have been a wooden chair on which a woman was able to sit or squat during labour.
And sometimes those are still used today. I mean, not a wooden chair maybe, but a similar idea.
Yes, the chair is representing something that was potentially more mainstream than birthing chairs are today, which is really interesting in terms of how many women might find that a much more comfortable option.
Next up, Elma has something older to show me. A compendium of Latin medical texts, including some composed by a female physician called Trota of Salerno. But what I'm most intrigued by is not the handbook itself, but an unexpected bit of graffiti hidden in its pages.
Early readers have used the spare sections of parchment to write in their notes, their summaries of the text, and it really shows close interaction with these learned Latin medical texts. And into the margin, which was probably actually the only spare area of this page by the looks of things. A slightly later hand has written in vertically a magical charm for protection in childbirth.
Wow, that's incredible.
For me, it shows the different types of resources people turn to for protection at that most potentially dangerous and difficult moment. It's also interesting because it's a glimpse of kind of action and performance, because the words were activated by being spoken out loud and by performing the sign of the cross upon oneself at regular intervals.
It makes me think a bit today of things like hypnobirthing, other things that people turn to the medicine to get them through pregnancy. Yeah. Do we have any idea who might have written it?
We don't know. We do notice that this writing is not the same as the very tiny notes that populate the rest of the page. And so it seems to me that someone very keenly wanted to write this down and record it, and they just looked for a spare blank section of parchment. And it's also quite rapidly written, and it suggests a kind of practical situation.
And hidden graffiti isn't the only secret that's been uncovered in Wellcome's medical archive. Recent analysis of this 500-year-old birth scroll has revealed much more than just ink on its parchment.
We collaborated with a team of protein scientists who were able to conduct analysis on tiny samples of the manuscript using a new technique that is non-invasive. And their findings were really remarkable. Alongside a number of plant and organic substances that we know were used in medicine, such as honey, milk, and legumes, they also found evidence of human cervicovaginal fluid.
So does it mean that the scroll was used in the birthing chamber?
I think we can say almost definitively yes. Legumes and honey featured in different types of remedies for ensuring a successful pregnancy, and also for helping the mother in the postpartum period as well.
Legumes and honey, it sounds quite nice. Before I leave, there's one more thing I want to take a look at. Today called Disease Woman, it's one of the key anatomical images of the Middle Ages. This version, with the top half now replaced by a modern facsimile, was printed in Spain in 1495. I can see here that we have a womb with a tiny little baby inside. What does this image then reveal about understandings of pregnant anatomy at the time?
The first thing to say is that this is meant to be a generic image of a woman's body to enable physicians and others to envisage all the potential health issues or problems that a woman would face. And so I guess it's unsurprising that in a generic image, they would show the woman in a state of pregnancy.
I mean, you wouldn't want to use this as a medical professional today, but it doesn't look a million miles off.
You're absolutely right. And it reveals that there was highly developed knowledge of female anatomy. People have very different reactions to it, but it's a really standout image because the vast majority of medieval anatomical images show the male body, with the unspoken message that the male anatomy is the generic human anatomy, which of course is absolutely not the case. And men and women's bodies are different. And pregnancy is, one of the absolutely key features of that. And so there's something very symbolic about this image, really, is that, it's the woman and she is pregnant.
While it's clear a lot has changed, it's interesting to see the parallels with the present, especially when it comes to tools like birthing stools or hypnobirthing being not too dissimilar to chanting your way through magic charms. So I wonder what other practices from the past feel familiar with those today.
One of the things I was most looking forward to about being pregnant was eating for two. Today, pregnant women are recommended a balanced diet and warned to steer clear of certain foods by doctors. But what about dietary advice in the past? Well, for a long time, there's been an understanding that what you ate could affect the baby growing inside you, just not in the way you might first imagine. In the early modern period, for example, it was thought that if pregnant women craved strawberries or red wine and didn't indulge, Their babies could be born with a red birthmark. And food cravings have long been seen, in the words of the 17th century medic Nicholas Culpeper, as one of the chiefest signs of conception. In 1682, the author of a satirical text called The 10 Pleasures of Marriage described pregnant women falling commonly from one longing to another, sending their husbands and servants out to find China oranges, Seville lemons, the largest asparagus, strawberries with wine and sugar, cherries of all sorts, and plums. But not all cravings recorded in the history books were quite so appetizing. A 1671 midwifery manual by Jane Sharp describes how a possible sign that someone was pregnant was that she, quote, hath a preternatural desire to something not fit to eat nor drink, as some women with child have longed to bite off a piece of their husband's buttocks. And she wasn't the only one concerned that pregnant women might have a hankering for human flesh. The 16th century medic Felix Platter wrote of how, quote, some love raw flesh like men-eaters, some have been like beasts and bitten people's arms by violence. Fingers crossed I'll make it through 9 months without turning to cannibalism.
It's not just strange cravings I've had to contend with. My wardrobe has, of course, taken a hit too. As the weeks go by and your belly gets bigger, it can be hard to find things to wear. But while today's high street has all manner of ready-to-wear maternity clothing, how did women in the past adapt their outfits to their changing bodies? To find out, I'm here at Claydon House in Buckinghamshire to speak with the fashion historian Serena Dyer, who has something rather interesting to show me.
This is a pair of 17th century stays, which is the term for a corset.
But it looks a bit different to a usual corset.
Indeed, well spotted. So these are maternity stays. So that might sound a bit unusual, a bit uncomfortable, a bit concerning, but not at all. These are incredibly cleverly designed garments that actually I think a lot of pregnant women today would actually quite enjoy wearing.
That's intriguing because I think if you hear the word corset, you immediately think of tiny waist, you think of something super restrictive. Is that not the case here?
No, so this garment is designed to give incredible back support, which I think pregnant women would like. But it's also got incredible flexibility. So if you see these tabs around the waist, they are made and positioned so that they'll flare more over the growing stomach. And then at the front, it laces closed. So at the very start of your pregnancy, you can just have that lace fully closed. And then as your belly grows, you've got full flexibility for that to open up over the stomacher.
And so you could wear this for the whole 9 months and then set it back to the start if you had a second pregnancy.
Exactly.
And a third and a fourth and a fifth.
Yeah. And because women in this period were pregnant for such a huge part of their lives, having garments like this that could be fully flexible throughout all of the trimesters, but also through your non-pregnant periods, is really ideal. You don't want to have constantly new garments, not when these garments were so expensive.
So, were these stays really as comfy as Serena suggests? Well, there's only one way to find out. So, Serena, you've laced me into this set of stays, a recreation set that you made. Mm-hmm. Doesn't quite fit.
I think if we'd had a long enough piece of lace, then actually these would have fit perfectly.
But do you know what? I am surprised how comfortable they are. Like you said, I feel fairly supported. I don't feel compressed. It feels like it's adapted to my shape rather than the other way around.
Well, they're really flexible. The boning that's in them will completely bend back on itself. So it really is moulding to the shape of your body.
And this, I guess, this stomacher, this would sit here.
Yes.
You could have that before you were pregnant and you'd need a bit of a bigger one to fill the gap,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not quite as comfy as the dungarees, but not bad. Back in my 21st century clothes, I wanted to find out from Serena, how else do we know what pregnant women in the past were wearing?
Other than those very rare survivals like the stays that we've just looked at, one of our best sources is pregnancy portraiture. this was really popular in the 16th and 17th century as a way for women to show off their motherhood, their ability to support the growing lineage of aristocratic families.
So there you mentioned this idea that women wanted to display, to flaunt the fact that they were pregnant because it meant they were fertile. Has that always been the case through history?
No, this is a big shift that happens in the 16th century. So prior to the 16th century, when Britain was a Catholic country, pregnancy was seen as something to be hidden, something that was private. But with the rise of Protestantism, this really celebrated women's bodies as life-giving vessels. And actually, under Protestantism, pregnancy was something to be celebrated, to be seen.
And what about, if we move things forward a bit, later in time in the 18th and the 19th centuries?
Mm-hmm. By the time we get to the 18th century, fashions have changed so that they're gently skimming over the pregnant bump. So it's sort of implicitly clear that a woman is pregnant, but it's not shown off in the same way as it was in the 16th and 17th centuries. By the 19th century, things get a lot more concealed and hidden and private again. So the Victorians did not like pregnancy to be on show because it was a reminder that people had sex. So everything is about concealing that pregnancy. But at the same time, we do get this rise in the commercialization of pregnancy garments in the 19th century. So we see specific pregnancy corsets, pregnancy dresses that have been designed and are being marketed specifically for that purpose.
So that's the kind of origins of today's maternity wear that you might find on the high street.
Absolutely. So by the time we get into the 20th century, this is a whole extra wardrobe that pregnant women need to buy for themselves. Whereas if we look back to the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, women were just wearing what they owned.
And there is one strange fashion I've heard about that I need to get your take on. Something called belly pads. What were they?
Yes, so this was a fashion in the 1790s. So if you can imagine women wearing Jane Austen style, high-waisted muslin gowns, there was this short trend to have a little pad underneath the belly that would give the impression that you're pregnant. Now, this is what the satirists would have us believe, that this was giving this impression of pregnancy. I think it's far more likely that women were trying to give the impression of classical statues. You know, these aren't massive pads, these are little pads, just to give that kind of rounded belly. But that's very much what the satirists and what the newspapers clung on to, was that women were trying to make themselves look pregnant.
Well, let's try and make that happen again, because I'll be bang on trend.
Pretty soon I'll be going on maternity leave and madly rushing around to get things ready for when the baby arrives. And these final few weeks feel like an important transitional time, and people throughout history have also recognised that. But while today prepping for a baby might mean batch cooking or packing a hospital bag, in the past, different preparations were made. One 13th century handbook compiled by the physician Aldobrandino of Siena advised that a couple of weeks before the birth, the mother should take a herb-filled bath before slavering her legs and vagina in chamomile oil and chicken fat. Protective talismans were also available, documented in the historical record from around the 13th century, but probably used for much longer. Stones known as eagle stones could be tied to a woman's thigh to promote a quick and safe delivery. Another option was, of course, turning to a higher power for help, especially the Virgin Mary or St. Margaret. And these figures appeared alongside prayers on birthing girdles, a kind of long scroll intended to be kept close or even wrapped around the woman's body when the time came. Then, much like today, it was a waiting game. While women in the past may have used different methods to endure and enjoy pregnancy, it's been fascinating to look back at how they dealt with many of the same issues and anxieties that we face today. So while I'm not sure I'll be slathering myself in chicken fat anytime soon, maybe it's time to try and find an eagle stone.